In the high hills of Connecticut, where the air smelled like pine and old money, the Grant estate stood like a modern castle, glass walls, gold-trimmed balconies, and fountains that sang louder than the birds. Inside lived Alexander Grant, a 48-year-old billionaire known across Wall Street as the Machine, a man who could crush competitors without blinking but hadn't smiled sincerely in a decade. To everyone outside, he had it all: a business empire stretching from Manhattan to Dubai, cars lined like soldiers in a marble garage, and a mansion so big even his voice echoed back like a ghost. But what no one knew was that beneath all the wealth, Alexander lived alone, lonely, broken, and haunted by guilt. His wife, Eleanor, had died 3 years earlier in a tragic car accident on the icy roads of Vermont. Since then, Alexander's life had lost color. He had staff, chefs, gardeners, drivers, guards, but no warmth. No laughter, no real family. Until one morning, his estate manager hired a new maid named Naomi Brown, a quiet black woman from Atlanta who moved to Connecticut with her 8-year-old daughter Zuri. Naomi's references were glowing: hardworking, honest, disciplined. She needed the job badly, and Alexander, too busy to care, approved it without even meeting her properly. But over the next few weeks, something strange began to happen. For the first time since his wife's death, Alexander noticed the sound of laughter echoing in his home again, not his own, but Zuri's. The little girl's voice filled the halls with a joy he hadn't realized he missed. She wasn't afraid of him, the billionaire boss everyone whispered about. She would wave at him when he walked by, sometimes offering him the cookies she baked with his chef, saying in her bright voice, "Mr. Grant, you look like you need one." It disarmed him every single time. But the staff started whispering. Some said Naomi and her daughter were taking advantage of Alexander's loneliness. Others hinted that maybe they were trying to get close to him for money or inheritance. Alexander brushed it off at first. Yet the seed of doubt was planted. One Friday night, after a long day of corporate meetings, Alexander overheard 2 of his butlers talking in the hallway. "Sir, the maid's kid's been in his study again," one whispered. "Touching his things. What if she steals?" That sentence hit Alexander harder than it should have. Steal, Zuri. The thought felt wrong, yet curiosity wrapped around his chest like a cold snake. That night, unable to sleep, Alexander came up with a plan. He'd pretend to fall asleep on the living room couch during his late-night reading session, leave his wallet and gold cufflinks on the side table, just within reach, and see what the maid's daughter would do. It wasn't about money. It was about truth, trust, the kind of trust he'd lost long ago when his own brother betrayed him for a business deal. The next evening, everything was set. The mansion was quiet. The clock ticked past 11 p.m. Naomi had put Zuri to bed in the small guest quarters near the kitchen, while Alexander sat in the grand living room, pretending to be lost in his book. The fireplace flickered, painting golden waves across his face. Slowly, he let his head fall back against the couch, feigning sleep. His breathing slowed, his eyelids fluttered. He waited. Minutes passed. Silence. Then soft footsteps echoed from the corridor. He could tell by the lightness, it wasn't Naomi, whose steps were slower, more deliberate. It was the little one. Zuri. Her small frame appeared in the doorway, clutching something in her hands, a tattered teddy bear with one eye missing. Alexander's pulse quickened. She looked around, tiptoeing closer. "Mr. Grant," she whispered. No answer. She stepped closer. "Are you sleeping?" Still nothing. She giggled softly. "You fell asleep with your book again." Then Alexander saw her eyes flicker to the table beside him, the wallet, the shining cufflinks, and the silver pen that had cost more than some people's rent. This was it, the moment of truth. Zuri hesitated. Her little fingers fidgeted. She looked at the wallet again, then back at his face. For a brief moment, Alexander's heart broke, because part of him didn't want her to fail. He wanted her to be good. He wanted proof that innocence still existed. But what she did next made his breath freeze. Zuri didn't take the wallet. She picked up his blanket from the armrest, gently covered him with it, and whispered, "You're gonna catch a cold like Mama used to say." Then she looked around again and noticed the half-empty glass of whiskey on the table. She frowned, set down her teddy bear, and went to fetch something from her pocket, a folded drawing made with crayons. Carefully, she placed it beside his drink. It was a picture of Alexander himself, drawn with messy colors, smiling, a wide, childlike smile he hadn't seen on his own face in years. At the top, she had written, "You look better when you smile." Alexander's eyes burned, but he kept them shut. The little girl went on tiptoe again, grabbed her teddy, and whispered something that made his chest tighten. "Mama says you're sad, but I think you're kind." Then she padded away. When the sound of her steps faded, Alexander finally opened his eyes. For a long time, he couldn't move. He stared at the drawing. The crayons had smudged at the edges, and there was a small fingerprint, probably chocolate from her late-night snack. But it was perfect, and for the first time in years, something inside him cracked open. The guilt, the loneliness, it all came pouring out in silent tears that glistened under the flickering firelight. The next morning, Alexander couldn't look Naomi in the eye. She noticed his quietness, asked gently if he was feeling unwell. He just nodded, murmuring, "Just tired." But inside, his mind raced. The girl's innocence wasn't what shocked him most, it was the realization of how much he'd lost trying to guard himself from betrayal. He had built walls so high no one could reach him, yet an 8-year-old had just climbed over them without even trying. But the story didn't end there. Because that night, the second night, something else happened. Something that would test not only Zuri's heart but Naomi's loyalty too. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2 continues the twist. Alexander sets a deeper test that spirals into danger and an unexpected truth about his wife's past and Naomi's connection to it. The next night, Alexander couldn't shake what he'd seen. That little drawing haunted him more than any boardroom memory. But the whispers in his house didn't stop. 2 staff members had seen him weeping near the fireplace, and rumors spread that the new maid's kid was somehow manipulating the boss. It infuriated him, not at them, but at himself for even caring. He'd never cared before. He was supposed to be steel. So, he decided to test Naomi herself this time, not out of cruelty but confusion. He told her his safe code was being changed and left an envelope with $50,000 in cash, for pickup by an associate, knowing the associate would never come. Then he told the cameras to stay off that section of the study. He wanted to see who Naomi really was when no one was watching. That evening, rain lashed the windows like nails. Zuri was asleep. Naomi entered the study quietly to clean, saw the envelope, hesitated. She could have taken it, she was months behind on rent, paying for her sick mother's medicine back home. Instead, she sat down, looked at the envelope, whispered, "Lord, test me if you must, but I won't fail this one," and placed it untouched inside a drawer with a note. "Sir, you left this here. I didn't know if it was private." Then she went to check on Zuri, humming a gospel tune that carried down the hall. Alexander, hidden behind the half-closed office door, felt his throat close. He realized the woman he doubted was the one person in his life living with more integrity than any millionaire in his circle. He came out quietly and found Zuri's drawing still by the fireplace, now joined by another, this one of him, Naomi, and Zuri together, holding hands beneath a big yellow sun. At the top, in shaky letters, it read, "Family." That single question broke him completely. The next morning, Alexander called everyone into the Great Hall. To everyone's shock, he dismissed half his old staff, the ones who'd whispered and poisoned his peace, and handed Naomi a sealed letter. Inside was a deed to a home near the estate, tuition for Zuri, and a handwritten note, "You reminded me what honesty looks like. Stay if you will, but as a friend, not a servant." Tears filled Naomi's eyes. She dropped to her knees, but Alexander stopped her. "No," he said softly. "Stand up. You taught me to do that again." Zuri came running in, hugging both of them, giggling, "So we're a family now." Alexander smiled, "For real this time?" "Yes, sweetheart, I think we are." Outside, the rain had stopped. The sun broke through the gray, reflecting on the mansion's windows like gold. Weeks passed, and the mansion that once echoed with silence now breathed life again. Laughter, the smell of fresh pancakes, gospel music on Sunday mornings. Alexander couldn't remember the last time he'd felt human. Naomi worked not as a maid anymore, but as the house manager and personal assistant, while little Zuri filled every corner with her joy. But one afternoon, while Alexander was cleaning his late wife's old study, a room sealed since the accident, he found an old box tucked behind the bookshelf. Inside were letters, dozens of them. One in particular made his heart stop. It was addressed to Eleanor Grant from Naomi Brown. His hand trembled as he unfolded it. The letter was dated years before Naomi ever worked for him. It read, "Dear Mrs. Grant, thank you for funding my mother's heart surgery. You saved her life. I will never forget your kindness." Alexander sat back in shock. His late wife had secretly helped Naomi's family years ago through her charity foundation, before the accident that took her life. That meant Naomi's arrival wasn't a coincidence. She hadn't come for money. She had come, unknowingly, full circle, back into the life of the very family that had once helped her. When he asked her about it, Naomi's eyes filled with tears. She explained quietly, "I didn't know you were her husband until the day I came here. When I realized, I stayed because it felt like I was meant to give back somehow." In that moment, Alexander understood what the universe, or maybe his late wife, had done. She'd sent him a reminder through the same woman she once helped. Kindness given had returned home. From that day forward, Alexander didn't just become Zuri's guardian, he made her his goddaughter, setting up a trust fund for her education and future. Naomi stayed on, not out of duty but love, and over time their bond grew into something that transcended titles or money, a chosen family built on faith, honesty, and second chances. Years later, when Alexander told the story at a charity gala, he ended it with a single line that silenced the entire room. "Sometimes, the people you test end up testing your heart, and showing you what it means to be alive again." And as the cameras flashed, Naomi and Zuri stood beside him, smiling, the billionaire, the maid, and the child who taught him how to feel again.